well. Today we will talk about the CSS layouts. Just a moment. About different types of CSS layouts, what exactly a layout is. We will refresh our knowledge of block level elements and inline elements. So we will compare them, compare and contrast. And we will also talk about the positioning of elements, about box models. We will also talk briefly about floating and about flex elements, and also say a few words about some tricky parts in creating CSS layouts. So, what exactly a CSS layout is? CSS layout is a combination of elements, how to say, which are placed in a page in one way or another. So there are different techniques that can help us control the positions of the elements on the page. For example, the elements can be placed in a row or in a column or in some kind of grid or something like that. So they can be placed, positioned differently. And for example, if we try looking at different pages, we can see that, for example, if we take a look at this old EPAM page, we can see that it has large blocks of elements. For example, here we can see the whole wrapper of the page, and here we can see the page header and the content and the footer, and these elements, we can see their child elements like different divs and spans and links, etc. But the blocks are here. They are highlighted so we can see them and we can place them somehow. So when we think of the page layout, we try to think about the main blocks and how they will be placed. And for example, here we can see a basic page template. So inside the body tag, we can see the wrapper, the page wrapper. So it's like the whole page container. And here we can see the header, the main element, which consists of one section and one aside element. And below the main element, we can see our footer. So this page is, it will probably look like this one. And also, if we start speaking about the position techniques, there are like 4 main of them. So these are the techniques that help us building layouts and position content inside our blocks, or even within the whole our page. So we can talk about the float property. This is the CSS property that allows elements to appear next to or apart from one another. So for example, if we have a text and an image element, so for example, if you have worked in such apps like Microsoft Word with documents, with for example text documents, and you may have noticed that you can place, if you have a text and an image, you can, for example, locate the image on the right side or on the left side of your page, and the text will somehow wrap it around. So this is what the float property does, and not only this. Also, I have a position property, which provides different ways to uniquely position an element. So it can be located, its position can be fixed, or it can have mm, uh, some distance from the previous element or from the parent element. So we will talk about all these properties later. So don't worry if you don't understand what this property means now. We also have a display property. We have already talked about block and inline elements, and there are a few more display properties that can help us position elements, and we will also talk about them. And we also have our z-index property, which can help us put different elements like ahead or behind one another. So it looks like there is one element and another element covers it. So we see them as if they were like one covers another. Okay. So the first type of layout, block level versus inline elements. I have already talked to you about the block level and inline elements. Let's just refresh this information. So the block level elements, these are the elements that have the property of display, which equals to block. And by default, they expand to the width of their parent element. So they take like the whole line. And if we talk about their height, then it will automatically equal to the height of their children, their child elements. So we can set margins or paddings to these elements, and we can also set width and height. But by default, if this, for example, div element has like 3 lines of text, or like 5 lines of text, just several lines, then it will take only this height and like end here. So it will take the whole line, but it won't take the whole page. And on the contrary, the inline elements, they don't have width or height, so we cannot set these properties. We can only set left or right paddings or margins, but not the top or not the bottom. And if we set the property of left or right, then it will automatically become a block level element, and the inline characteristics won't apply to them anymore. And by default, it doesn't take the whole line, so it goes after the previous element in the same line. So here are the examples of such elements like anchors, links, spans, B, EM, I, and etc. And we can also set the vertical align property of its text, so it can be placed in the middle or a little bit higher, so on the top or at the bottom of the element. Here you can see the list of all block level elements and inline elements. So you will see this presentation and you can take a closer look at all of them. So, for example, the div element, the paragraph, the different types of lists, etc., or inline elements such as links, BRs, buttons, and so on. And here on the next page, we also have this list duplicated with the block level elements and the inline elements. And if we talk, if we say a few words about the H1 to H6 elements, just before we proceed with the display property. These are the block elements, but sometimes there are cases where you don't need to use them. For example, if you are creating a web application instead of a website. So semantically, there are some document parts like frequently asked questions, etc., like terms and conditions. But semantically, heading elements can be replaced with equal block elements like paragraphs. And if we talk about the display property, which we have already talked before, so by default, it can be either block or inline, but there are other properties. Like, for example, we can say we can set the display property as inline block, and it is like a combination of these two, of the block display and inline. What does it mean? It means that this element will have a width and a height, so you can set a width and height for these elements, and also you can set margins and paddings. So they will behave like block elements, but they won't by default take the whole line, expand to the whole line width, and they won't start with the next line. So they will go like one by one within the same line. And we also have a property of display table. Honestly, this one is rarely used nowadays because it's we used to create layouts with the help of display table back in the years. Now it's not very common. So you can, if you have a container with child elements, you can set the property of display to table to the container, and its children elements can be table cells or table rows. So they can be styled like children of a table. And also, we can also, when we define a display property, we can not only we can not only define its location within its container, but we can also make this element a container. So we also have the display none property, which can hide the element from the page completely. And we also have the display flags and display grid properties. We won't talk about them in details today, so they are kind of out of scope for this course, but they can help us how to say, for example, if we have a container with child elements and we set the display flags property to this container, we can place its children in a row, in a column, etc. So we can place them somehow. And for example, I can show you a small Flexbox playground. I guess it's here. So for example, if we have a container with elements and we can set different properties like flex direction. So we could be like row or column, or we can align these elements differently. So they can be aligned like this or like this. And there are different properties within this technology. So you can learn about this separately. This one is very useful. And it's the same with grid. So it works almost like a table. And so you have like two axes, like one another, and you can place different elements in different combinations, like here. And if you ask whether you should use the Flexbox or the grid technology in your projects, actually it depends on the project, because for example, grid is a new technology, so it's not supported by many browsers yet. For example, if you work on an old project which needs to be supported by old versions of Internet Explorer, then probably you shouldn't use grids or even flex boxes. But well, for your studies, it's up to you. But in most cases, you may use it when it's the simplest solution, or if it's like the only solution. But well, I could say that it is very commonly used anyway. So it depends on the project. Do you have any questions?
I have the confused about what's on a difference between inline block versus inline, and
Mm,
which case we will use them.
just a moment, just let me show you this. For example, we have 3 spans of text. So you can see different spans. So by default, they are inline elements. And if we try setting width, for example, width of 100 pixels, it won't work because they don't have this property. And the same with height. And for example, this one will have the class of middle. And if we style it differently, display. So if we set it to block, then it will start with the next line. And if we set it to inline block, then it will be on the same line as the others, but it will have the width and height properties. So do you see the difference between inline block and inline block? So it's like a combination of the two. So if we set to block, then it will be like this. And if we set to inline, then it will be like these two.
I see that's when you set middle to block. The inline element below the block will also wrap to the new line.
Yeah, but it's like this. So if I add more inline elements here or here, and if I set it to block, then it will be like this. So all inline elements go in line, and this one, it starts with another line and ends here.
Yeah, I see it's like the block element will create a new line
Yeah, yeah,
different from upper and below of this.
yeah, and yeah, inline block, it will
It's
it
like a
can
combination.
yeah. So it has all these properties, and we can also set margins, paddings to this element. So it behaves like the block element, but it stays in the same line with the others.
Yeah, it's okay now.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions? I don't see chat. Just a moment. Let me check. There any difference between display flags? I'm not sure if display flags box exists. It's just the flags box is just the name of the technology, and the property is display, which equals to flags. So it's the flags box. It's only like the whole name of this type of display, but the right property is display flags. Okay. Okay, let's proceed. Positioning. Just a moment. Yeah. So if we talk about positioning, the basic positioning is elements go one by one. So if there are block elements, they are placed in one column, so one by another. And if these are the inline elements, they go one by one in a row. How can we change it? So we can use floats. So this element has the property of float left, so it goes on the left side, and all the other content just wraps it like this. So this text starts here, and then it proceeds here. We also have different types of positioning that we can like rewrite. So for example, we have relative positioning and absolute positioning. Um, how they work is that, for example, this element, it should go here, like they should be, they should go in one column. But we can change its positioning, how to say, the place where it is located by moving it to mm, to an exact amount of pixels. So for example, we set the relative position and the distance of, for example, 20 pixels from the top and, for example, 10 from the left, and it will move like this. And there also is an absolute position. So if we position this element absolutely, it won't be dependent on any other content on the page. So uh, it will be positioned separately. We will talk also about this later. And first, I would like to talk about the float property. So float property, as I said, it places an element on the left or right side of its container, and it allows all text and inline elements wrap around it. And the element is like removed from the normal flow of the page. Mm, but it still remains a part of this page, part of the page flow. Um, so, for example, on a page, if we have an image or any other element, and we have some text, and okay, let's pretend that this one is a div, this float me element. And in HTML, it would be written like a div and a paragraph. And the div has a float of none, so they go one by one. And if we set the float left property, then it will go here, and the text will start on the right side from the div element. And same with float right, so it goes to the right and text starts here. We also have a clear property. So sometimes we can move, for example, one element to the left and one to the right, and we still don't want our text to wrap around these elements. So we can set the property of clear either to none, so the text will go from the beginning as in the previous example. And we can also set the clear property to left. So it will still wrap around the right positioned element, but it will go under the left positioned element. And if we set clear to right, but also we can set it to both, so it will go after all elements that have the property of float, either right or left. And there is this clear fix pattern. So, for example, if we if an element contains only floated elements, its height collapses. And if you want this container to fit the heights of its children, and for example, like here, you have some text and you have an image which has a property of float right, and you want it to be like this, so all the content will be inside the container. Then you can use this pattern. You can add a pseudo element after this container and just add these properties. Maybe you won't even need to think how they work, but it's just a pattern which is widely used among developers. So you just probably need to try it by your hands and remember that it will work. Any questions about the float properties? Honestly, nowadays they're not commonly used because before any Flexbox models or grid models were invented, we used to implement floats as tools for adaptive and responsive layout, but now they go like to the past, so we don't use them commonly. But still, you need to know how they work. Okay, if you don't have any questions, let's proceed with the overflow. For example, you can have an element with
Sorry,
yeah,
I have
sure.
a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so my question is, so Clearfish is only used for text, right?
Yeah.
Only used for text or for picture? Because that example, I only saw I only see a Clearfish is used for text, right?
It can be used for both text and pictures. So for those elements that have the property of float left or float right, doesn't depend on what the type of the element is.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to the overflow. Here, everything is simple. So for example, you have a container with fixed height and you have some text inside. And it is a long text and the container is not enough. So it ends here and the text is longer and bigger, and it creates a text overflow. So what can we do here? We can set the overflow of visible, so we can see that all the text that overflows its container. It doesn't look nice, but still it exists. We can hide its overflow by setting the overflow to hidden. So we will see only the visible part of the text, and we won't see everything that goes below because it's just hidden, and we cannot reach this text. We can set it to scroll, so we will have a scroll bar that we can that can help us navigate through the text. But for example, if the text is shorter and it fits in the container, then you will still have this scroll bar, and it doesn't look so nice either. And finally, we can set it to like the automatic look. And so if the text is short, then it will fit inside the container. And if it's long, then the scroll bar will appear. So it doesn't appear if you don't need it. I guess here everything is quite simple. So we will.
Sorry, I have a question about
sure.
that. What's mean of fixed height?
For example, if you have a block element, and usually it fits the height, the height of the content. But for example, you have this div and you set the height of, for example, 100 pixels. So it will always be 100 pixels, no matter how long the text inside is. And you need to decide what you want to do with this text. So if you either you want to show it anyway, if it's longer, or you need to scroll or hide it. So fixed is like fixed height is the height which is set in fixed units like pixels.
So how do we transform from the fixed height element to a non-fixed height?
We just remove the fixed property, the height property, and it will fit the content of the child element.
Yeah. So it means, so I think we don't need the hierarchy. If we don't set the hierarchy, and the container will grow with the content.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's cool to know.
Okay. Let's move on. Position. So by default, all elements on the page have the position of static. So they go one after another, either in a column or in a row, like this. So 1, 2, 3, position of static. And it's also called the normal flow of the document. If we set any properties like top, right, bottom, left, or z-index, then this will have no effect on these elements. Let's see what happens when we change the position. For example, we can set the position to relative. So normally the elements would be placed like this, like 1, 2, 3. And we can set the position of the second element to relative, and set a property of top to 40 pixels and left to 40 pixels as well. And so this position relative is relative to its place where it should have been if it would have the position of static. So here is its place. So normally it would go here, and we set the top of 40. So it moves 40 pixels to the bottom and 40 pixels from the left side. And so it moves 40 pixels to the right. And we can see that it has moved. The absolute position works a little bit differently. So normally it would go the same, like 1, 2, 3, two blue blocks and one yellow. And if we set the position absolute to the yellow element, then it would be it won't be in the flow anymore. So the flow goes like 1, 2, and etc., but it's not in the flow. So we just picked it up and removed from the flow. And we can also set the top and left property of 40 pixels, but it will go from the end of its parent element. So like here, or the end of the document. So it will go from the this end to 40 pixels and from this to 40 pixels as well. So all other elements behave like this one doesn't exist. Normally, this top and left are counted from the top and left side of the page, of the whole page. But if this element has a parent element which has a position different from position static, like relative, absolute, sticky, or etc., then all top and left properties are counted from the end of the parent element. So that's also very important to remember. Position fixed and sticky work also a little bit differently. So, for example, the positioning of fixed is used for creating different menus, headers, like for example, if we go to the Amazon, now we see that here the header is moving with the content of the page, but probably you have noticed at different websites that there are headers that are not scrolled down. So for example, this header stays on the same place and everything else is scrolled up or down. I'm just not sure if I can find, oh, like here. So if you see this one has a position of fixed and everything else is scrolled. And positioning sticky, it's a little bit complicated comparing to all the others. I haven't seen it much on the in the production code. So the element can be stuck at some place, so like fixed. So all the content on the page will be scrollable, and this element will remain on the same place. But if we scroll till the next element, which also has a position of sticky, then this new element will stay at the same place and the previous element will go with the flow. So this one is a little bit tricky, but if you see it, you will probably remember what it does. But the fixed position is used very widely, especially with menus. And yeah, as I said before, an absolute element is positioned relative to its closest position ancestor. So by default, it is the web page, the whole page of the document, and if it has an ancestor, so a parent element, um, who has a position of relative, fixed, sticky, or even absolute, so anything else except static, then it will be moved within its ancestor. A relatively common mistake is to believe that only position relative works here. So yeah, it's not only relative, but relative is widely used. Okay, so do you have any questions about the positioning?
Can we use top left for starters position?
For static?
Yes.
No, it won't work.
And what's meaning of the word an ancestor?
Parent element or parent element of the parent element, or so all like parent elements and parent elements of the parent elements.
Yeah. So the word closest ancestor mean the element will look for like in parent and in parent to find the closest position element to stuck with.
Yeah, so for example, if its direct parent has a position of static, then it won't work with it. Then it goes upper, and for example, the parent element of the parent element has a position of relative. Then okay, it will be positioned within this element.
Yeah, thank you.
So it will be like closest ancestor. Okay. Let's move on. Talking about hiding elements, we have two different properties, display none or visibility hidden. So the difference between them is that if we set the visibility hidden to the element, then the place for this element is still reserved. So we see that some element should be here, so there is an empty space, but there is no element. So we cannot see the element itself. And if we say the display none, if we set the display none, then it will be hidden completely. So no space is reserved for this element. Okay. And if we talk about the box model, so yeah, a few words about the box model. I'm sure all of you, or almost all of you, are already familiar with the margins and paddings of the elements. So the box model claims that each element consists of the following properties, or like the following parts. So it is the content of the element itself. So it can be either text or image or anything else. Then we have our paddings. So these are this is the inner space inside the element, which goes inside the border. So we can have the border of the element, and inside so the distance between from the border of the element to its content is called the padding. And margin is the distance outside the border, so between the element and another element, or between the element and its parent. So probably you already know how to set margins or paddings. So we have 4 different properties: margin top, right, bottom, and left, which can be set in length, like pixels or any other units, and percents, and they can be set to auto. And same with paddings. Only with paddings it cannot be set automatically. So for margins, it will go. I will show you later how you can position elements with the help of the margin auto, but mostly we use fixed units like pixels. We can also unite all these properties and write only margin, just one word margin, and set all 4 margins. So going from the top clockwise, like first, second, third, and fourth. We can set 2 properties, like if we say, for example, margin 50 pixels, 25 pixels, it means that it will have 50 pixels here, I'm sorry, and 25 here. And also top, horizontal, bottom, and all 4, as I said, top, right, bottom, and left. Same goes with padding. So it also always starts with top and goes clockwise. Yeah, so here it is. So we can also set 2 or 3 properties, or if we say just like padding equals to 50 pixels, so setting padding 50 pixels mean that it will go in all 4 dimensions. And a few more words about the box sizing. So as we talked about this box model, we should say a few words about its size. So by default, the box sizing is set to content box. What it means is it is that if we set a width or a height to an element, for example, 100 pixels, then it will measure it like 100 pixels here, and all the paddings and borders don't count. So in reality, this element, if it has any paddings or borders, it will be bigger. And if we set the box sizing to border box, for example, same 100 pixels, I'm sorry, then it will count everything that goes inside. So it will be fit in 100 pixels and will contain so all the borders, all paddings, all the content goes inside those 100 pixels. So here we can compare these 2 models. So here you can see.
Sorry,
Yeah,
can you
sure.
make the string speak bigger?
Sorry?
Can you make the slide bigger? Because I think it's
Sorry. Just a moment. Um, Just a second. It should appear now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay now.
Yeah. So yeah, here the width is 200 pixels and the height is 200 pixels. The padding is 50 pixels and the border is 25 pixels something. So if the border, the box sizing is set to content box, then we will have the width of 200, the width of 200, the height of 200, the padding of 50 and 50, and the border of 25 pixels. So in reality, the width of all these container won't be 200, it will be 200 plus 50 on each side, so it will be 300 and 25 and 25, so 350. And here it will be 200 and 200, and everything goes inside, so the content area will be much smaller. And yeah, so here you can see all these dimensions. So as I said, it will be in reality all these elements, it will be equal to its width and its height will be will equal to 350 total width, same with height, because of the box sizing, which is set to content box. So here you can also see all those dimensions. Here you can see that it equals to its width or height equal to 200 pixels. So total width, total height are equal. Box sizing is set to border box. And this is how the dimensions are calculated. So the border of 25, the padding of 50, and the width and height of the content area will be 50 on 50. So it's not 200 on 200. And in general, it is, I can say that the content box is rarely used. We mostly use border box because it's easier to manipulate. It's easier to work with the elements if you know what space they take, like as a whole, with all borders, paddings, and everything that goes inside, instead of just calculating the real dimensions of an element, depending on what their content width is. So it's more common to use the border box for box sizing. That is probably what you have to remember. If you will work as developers, you have to follow the project's conventions. So you have to ask your team leader what you should use, the border box or the content box. But I am 99% sure that it will be border box. Okay, so before we proceed with margins and stuff, do you need a break? So it's 34 minutes now. Do you have any questions on the box model?
I have a question about the last slide, the previous slide. What is production project?
I mean, if you how to say, The production project is an actual working project. So if you create some projects for studies or I don't know, you want to build your own app, you may use all the all the technologies you want. But if you go to an existing project, then you have to ask your colleagues what patterns, what technologies are used, and what kind of properties are common on the project, so that your code will fit the code style of the whole team.
Yeah, it's clear now. Oh.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so if there are no questions, then it's 3:36. Let's take a 10 minutes break. And we will meet here at, so your time, it will be 7:45. Is it okay for you? Okay, so it's at 19:45. I'm waiting for you here. So is everybody back? Well, I hope you are. Okay, yeah, I see that in the chat that you're back. That's great. Okay, so let's move on. There are not so many slides left, so let's proceed. Next topic is the collapsing of margins. So it happens in different cases. So, for example, if you have two block elements going one by one, like one above and one below, and for example, each one of these elements has a margin, a top and bottom margin of 10. So the higher one will have a bottom margin of 10 and the lower one have a top margin also of 10. And so what will be the distance between these two elements? You could think that it will be equal to 20, probably, because it has a one element has a margin and another has, but it is not that simple. So if these are just two elements with the margins, as I said, like margin of 10 and 10, they always collapse. So the total distance between these elements will be will equal to 10. So it's not that they are added to one another. So it won't be like 10 plus 10. It will be just 10. So if you don't want to have any issues related to that, it's common to add only a top or a bottom margin. So you just add a bottom margin here and you don't add any top margin here. So they won't collapse. There will be only one margin of one element. Sometimes there are margins of elements which are located like one inside the other. So we have parent element which has its own margin, and we have a child element which also has a margin top of 10. And an interesting thing goes here. So if the inner element has a border, then these margins are not collapsed. So it will be located inside the parent element, and it will have its margin, which is calculated from the top uh, uh, the end of the content area of the parent element. But if it doesn't have any borders, so there is nothing that can separate the parent and the child element, so they will fit each other, and their margins will also fit each other and collapse. So for example, if this element, the inner element, has a margin of 10, then it will go outside the parent element. So the main rule is if nothing can separate parent and child elements, such as any content or borders, then margins collapse. Or if there is a border or any other element, then they do collapse. And there are another cases. For example, here we have two blocks and an empty block between them. And this blue element, it has its width and height, the height of 10 pixels. So you can see it here. And you can see margin top of 10 pixels and margin bottom of 10 pixels. So if it has a height, fixed height, then, or any content inside, then these margins are not collapsed. So yeah, if it's empty and it has a height, then they don't collapse. Or if there is an element between these two, the middle element, but it doesn't have any height, so you cannot see it. So although it exists, you cannot see it on a page. In this case, their margins are collapsed, and the distance between the previous element and the next element equals to 10 pixels general. Do you have any questions on that?
I have a confusion about margin collapsing in the case the parent and the children uh, the not have the content is separate them. I don't fully understand about that case.
Okay, let me show you. So, for example, we have a div class outer. And inside we have a div class inner. For the outer element, we set a width of, for example, 300. 300. Example margin of, I don't know, 50 pixels, and the background color yellow. Okay, for the inner elements, okay, it will be in the width 100. Right. 100. Margin 30 pixels. Background color of tomato. And as you see, it doesn't have any borders. So if we take a look at their margins, just a moment. So this is the orange area here, is the margin of the outer element, and if we take a look at the margin of the inner element, so they collapse with each other. So it ends here as well. And if we need something to separate this element from the end of the outer element. So it can be either a border, 1 pixel, solid 0. Just a moment. Yeah. So if the outer element has a border, then this can be like a separator.
Yeah, yes,
So,
I can feel
yeah.
this. I can feel this guy. Sorry, because so what element we need to put the content into? Just parent, children, or we need to put content in both?
So for example, we can put any other element, like another div. So you cannot see it. Just a moment. For example, some text inside. So here will be the margin. And I'm not sure about the pseudo elements, but let me just check before. No, it doesn't work with pseudo elements, but maybe with outer. No, with pseudo elements it doesn't work. So yeah, mostly it is the border or any other element before the inner element.
Before an element, okay. So, what's happened if we put that in the inner? Because I see in this case, the inner is the empty element. What's happened if we put some text on that?
Empty element, it won't work.
No, no, the div with the class inner, I see don't have any content in that.
Like this.
No, inside the div, maybe we can post some text on them.
Here
Below
or here.
yeah.
Text like this.
Yeah.
No, it won't work either.
It won't work. Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess if we
Mm.
set, for example, class like before, separator, and we set a height to this element, then it will work. So
Yeah.
like, so here's the separator, which we cannot see, and here is our inner element.
So we have to put some content before the children we want to separate to avoid the margin collapsing. Sorry.
Yeah, a content or some content or border or margin collapsing does not work with flex elements and floated elements. And also you can use paddings instead of margins.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, it's mostly written here, like if there is. And by the way, yeah, padding can also be a separator. So for example, we can put not a border, but padding, like padding 10 pixels. So yeah, it will be inside and work as well. And yeah, so mostly, yeah, everything is written here. Okay. Any more questions? Okay, then if everything's clear, then let's proceed with white spaces. It's not a common case because I have never seen spans as squares, but if you put 3 spans in a row, then you will see these little white spaces between them, which you just cannot track. So these are like spaces between letters in a word. And if your spans have these properties pre-written, like display inline block, background royal blue, and the set of width and height, then they will look like this. But if you want to get rid of these tiny little spaces, then what you can do? There are some anti-patterns which are considered as bad practices. So for example, you can write these elements in a row, or you can add an empty comment between them, or you can leave a non-claused tags, but you should never ever do this because it can have bad side effects on your code. Instead, you can set a font size of 0. So this is like a trick that can help you remove the unnecessary spaces between these elements. And all the rest leaves as it is. And you set the font size to the parent element. So in this case, it will be the div element. But I cannot think of any example where this can be used, but just so you know about this. And yeah, it seems problematic to handle, but it's a non-issue. And if you, this case is shown here so that you just know that it can exist, but most probably you won't face it in your work. And a few words about centering. Sometimes you need to place an element in the center of a parent element, and there are different ways that you can use here. So the first one, you can, so you have a parent element and a child element, and you have to place the child element inside of the parent element in the center. So what you can do here, you can set display inline to the child element, inline or inline block, doesn't matter. And to the parent element, you set the text align center, and it just centers this element as a regular text. You can set the margin to automatic value or 0 auto. and it will be centered here, but just horizontally. So it's just centered like from left to right, but it won't be located here in the middle. So it only works in this dimension. What also you can do is to set the margin of auto and all four properties, top, left, right, and bottom, to 0. Remember that these properties will only work if the position of the element is not static. But there also are some side effects, because as you may see here, we have the width and height of the element written and set to 50 pixels each. But if we remove one property, such as width or height, so the height remains the same, 50 pixels. And if we remove the width of the element, then it will take the whole size of its parent. So just beware of that. What else can we do? We can set display of the parent element to grid and set the margin auto to the child element. So it can also be located in the center. It can also be used with flexbox. So you say you set display flex to the parent, and these two properties justify content center and align items center, which means that everything inside the parent element, the container, will be located in the center. But it only works if the child element has a position of static, not absolute. No, sorry. It doesn't work with the position of absolute, but works with relative and static. With the position absolute, you can use these tricks. You set a position relative to the parent. Actually, it's not just relative, it can be anything except static. And for the child element, you set these properties. So it will be position absolute, top 50%, left 50%, and half of the sizes for margin top and margin left. So it will be half of this property and half of this. It's I don't know, looks like a hack, but it also can um, locate the element in the center. The only downside of this technique, I see that you have to calculate all the margins, and they are tightly related to the width and the height of element. And I think it is it's it can be kind of difficult to work with. So you can get confused with all these numbers. And another option is to you set the position of relative and absolute as well. So relative to the parent and absolute to the child. And you set the top and left properties to 50%. So the child element will be moved 50% from here, like here, and 50% from the left side. And then you need to, so the corner, this corner of the element will be in the middle, but you need to move it halfway back in each direction. So the center of the element will be in the middle of its parent. So you have this transform property, and translate means that you move it halfway back to the top and halfway back to the left. And this is also another way that works. It's recommended here to use in the projects the last option as a mix-in. So the combination of the position of absolute relative for parent, absolute for child, top and left of 50%, and transform translate. But honestly, in our work, we mostly use the flag boxes. So probably it's up to you or up to your team lead. Depends on who you will work with on your project. So do you have any questions on centering elements?
What are the difference? What are the differences between transform translate versus using top left? The way they calculate the percent.
Just a moment. How to say? Margin top. So they work quite in the same way. So here, well, this way is better because it doesn't depend on the size of the element. So you said the 50% of the element, and it will move halfway the size of the element. But here, you should also move it halfway back, like the size of the element, but you cannot set a percent here, because margin top, okay, it will send the element halfway back, but if you type the percent here, then it will calculate for example, 50% of the parent element.
So what's the difference between the 50% of property like top left versus the 50% of translate?
So here, the top and left are the 50% of the parent element, and here it is 50% of the child element. So for example, let me show you. Okay, we will leave the old elements. Okay, like this. I will remove all the text. Separator. Okay, so here we have just okay, I will remove this margin. Okay, so here we have two elements, one inside the other, and if we set here the position of relative, here the position of absolute, and top 50%, and bottom of percent. Oh, sorry, not bottom, but left. Okay, so you see, this is the middle of this element. So 50% here is 50% of the parent element, right? So it's 50% and 50%. Is it clear?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, okay. So Okay, then, for example, if we said to the inner element, if we said margin top. Okay, if we try to set it to minus 50%, then do you realize why it didn't work? So we have to move it. So we have to move it to slightly to the top and slightly to the left. And we need to calculate, so this middle, this point should be here in the middle, right? So we should move it this distance to the top and this distance to the left, right? So it should be 50% of the child element.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like we trying to move the heart of the children element same position with the heart of the parent.
Yeah, exactly. So if we set margin top to minus 50%, then it will calculate the 50% of the parent, which we don't need, because it will send it back to the top. And so we can either calculate it manually. So we see that, okay, width and height are 100 pixels. So 100 divided by 2, then it will be, okay, 50 pixels. And, sorry, minus 50. And margin left, minus 50 as well. So now we get the result, but it's hard to work like this. So each time when we want to change the size of the element, we need to calculate all the numbers.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, if we just replace it with the transformed translate property. Yeah.
What shortcut key you use to comment the code?
Sorry?
What the shortcut key you have used to comment the code? To like you use push the code in the comment, like you using.
You mean the
Shortcut.
The shortcut you use to make a margin top and margin left into the comment part.
To comment the live code.
so I'm not sure I got you clearly.
Like you make the margin top and margin left not work anymore.
Yeah, so instead we say this.
Sorry, that's how you
Yeah,
do
yeah,
that. You put it in the slat and asterisk, and you have a shortcut key on the keyboard to make that. Yeah, to make it place in the square brackets.
So we agreed that this doesn't work. Okay, so yeah, like, and instead we can use the transform translate. So we sorry, not 50, but minus 50 and minus 50. So this means that we calculate 50% of the element, the inner element, and we move it like by the so yeah, so this is the this dimension, this axis. So
vertical.
yeah, vertical, and the first one is horizontal.
Yes. Yeah, so if we use this way, we don't have to calculate manually.
Yeah. So in this case, so margin 50 doesn't work, 50% doesn't work because it calculates the 50% of the parent element, and transform translate with 50%, it calculates the 50% of the child element, which we really need.
Yeah, it's clear now.
Okay, but they do the same thing but differently, and the second way is more convenient for us. Okay, we have few more slides. The Z index, the so-called Z index, and the staking order. So the Z index CSS property sets like the Z order of a positioned element. What does that mean? If we remember mathematics, then we know that we have our axis and our y axis, like x and y, and we also have a Z index, which helps us like set different order of the elements. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can you please? Yeah, thank you. And now everybody's muted. Yeah. So now we can see that some elements can be positioned above, how to say, above or below other elements, which means like ahead or behind. So, for example, if we, let me just show you an example here. For example, if I copy this, inner, for example, inner 2, and it will have 2. It will have, for example, background color, for example, teal. And now, what's going on here? We have an outer element and the two inner elements, and both of them are positioned absolutely, and right now the inner, okay, let it be inner 1 inner 1 element, and here it will be inner 1. It is placed like behind the inner 2 element, but if we set the Z index of, for example, 1, then it will be placed above it, so like closer to us. And if we, for example, make inner 2 visible, so for example, it will be like 150 and 100 and 150, or like 50, then we see that there actually are 2 elements, but one is placed behind the other. So by default, all elements have the Z index of 0. So if you set Z index of 1 to any element, then it will be, it will have more priority and it will be closer to us. So if we set, for example, the Z index of 2, or in this case, if they have the same that index, then the element that goes after, so the second one will be closer to us. For example, if we set the z index or 2, this one will be closer. And by default, they all equal to 0, as I said, so this one will be closer. And we can also set a negative z index. So for example, that index of -1, then it will be completely hidden. And just let me, so it will be hidden by all the elements on the page. So this parent element, it goes closer to us if this one has a z index of -1. And so here you can see different numbers, different priorities of z indexes. Keyword is z index auto or z index 0. And sometimes, just a moment, let me make this bigger. There is such definition as the stacking context. So this is a group of elements inside one parent element. So these are the elements that can be joined together with different combinations of positioning and z index. Sometimes this z index cannot work. That, for example, here we have different combinations of positioning and z indexes, but these are different stacking contexts. So this, for example, for div number 4, it has z index of 50, but it goes after all elements, and so it is located closer to us because it has a different context. So it's there is a group of these 3, and this one 4 is how to say, a different group. So that's why sometimes your z indexes could not work, because you need to look at how elements are grouped inside their containers. And sometimes, yeah, there is a pattern where you want to ensure that your element will be on top of everything, and sometimes people set such values of the z indexes like 1 million, billion, or something like that. You probably don't need to do this because I'm not sure if it will help. And you'd better check the stacking context and see the order of the elements. And here you can see different useful links about the CSS layouts, about the Flexbox. So here you can, there is a playground where you can do some exercises with the Flexbox model and learn a little bit about the CSS grid, and also study the layout cookbook at the MDN. And for today, that's pretty much it from my side. Do you have any questions? I see that.
Do we have to remember on the Z index we're using, or we have some tool to manage them?
I guess you have to, how to say, well, it's not that we use the Z indexes very often. Sometimes we just need to add to make some element be on top of other elements, for example, like the modal windows or something like that. And in this case, it's enough to just give it a positive value of Z index, just like 1 or something like that. And I guess that you don't need to remember all this, but maybe you have to just write your CSS code in a clear way so that your colleagues would see which element has which CSS that index value. So
Yeah, it's clear now.
yeah. Okay, I see there are some yeah, top 50% and left 50%. There is a picture in the chat. There is a question about the comment. So did you ask about how to make comments in CSS?
Yeah, yes. The shortcuts you use, the shortcut key you
shortcuts.
use.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So it's not the Control-C and Control-K. I haven't checked this. I use Control plus slash like this.
Yeah.
So it should work in all IDEs or VS Code or in playgrounds. It's pretty common. Or in the Mac.
That shortcuts work even on HTML, CSS, every.
Yeah, yeah. In JavaScript,
Yeah.
command plus slash for Mac. So the first one will be for Windows. Okay, any more questions? Okay, so if there are no questions, probably I will wish you a nice evening and a nice weekend and wish good luck with your homework.
I have a question about homework.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I missed I missed the homework 2 and 3. Yeah, because my work. So because my job, so I missed the
Okay.
2 homework. So that is a problem. So
I guess you have to write Irina or your mentors to because it's like it's more an organizational question and I'm not sure if I'm in charge for that. But I guess if you write Irina, she will tell you what you should do with this.
yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Cool. So thank you guys for joining my lecture today and see you on Monday.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye bye.